What happens when two of the world's most powerful nations remain locked in a brutal, unending conflict? What happens when global superpowers pick sides, fueling the fire with military aid, weapons, and economic sanctions? And most importantly, what happens if the world fails to stop it? The war in Ukraine has lasted for years, with no clear end in sight. What began as a regional conflict has evolved into a global power struggle. As tensions continue to rise, former U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a chilling warning. If world leaders fail to act, this war could spiral out of control and lead to a third world war. With mounting casualties, rising geopolitical tensions, and the involvement of major world powers, the stakes have never been higher. Could this conflict truly escalate into a global war? Is there a real possibility that NATO, Russia, and even China could be drawn into a direct military confrontation? And more importantly, can peace still be achieved? In this video, we break down the reality of the Russia-Ukraine war, the potential for escalation, and Trump's proposed solution. Could this war end in just weeks? Or are we already past the point of no return? Since 2022, Ukraine has been at war. What began as a full-scale invasion has now turned into a prolonged, bloody stalemate. Cities have been reduced to rubble, millions of people have fled, and the cost of war continues to rise, both in human lives and economic devastation. While Ukraine has shown remarkable resilience, the country is struggling. Despite receiving billions in military aid from the West, Russian forces continue to push forward. The Ukrainian government has relied heavily on Western support, but as the war drags on, many nations are beginning to question how long they can sustain this level of involvement. Meanwhile, Russia has also paid a heavy price. Economic sanctions have crippled its economy, yet they have not stopped its war efforts. The Kremlin remains defiant, claiming that its objectives must be met at any cost. Both sides are suffering, yet neither is willing to back down. And this is what makes the situation so dangerous, because when wars reach a deadlock, the risk of escalation increases dramatically. What makes this war so unique, and so dangerous, is that it's no longer just about Russia and Ukraine. The world has chosen sides. The United States, NATO, and the European Union have poured in financial and military support to back Ukraine. On the other side, Russia has strengthened its alliances with China, Iran, and North Korea, securing weapons and financial resources to sustain its war efforts. This is no longer a war between two nations. This is a global power struggle. And historically, when world powers take sides in a prolonged conflict, the risk of a larger war becomes very real. We've seen it before. World War I started as a localized conflict, but the involvement of allied nations turned it into a global catastrophe. The same happened in World War II, where regional disputes escalated into a war that engulfed the entire planet. Could history repeat itself? Could the involvement of NATO, Russia's allies, and rising tensions between global superpowers lead to another world war? According to Donald Trump, the answer is yes. And that's why he's urging leaders to act before it's too late. Donald Trump has repeatedly warned that if this war does not end soon, the consequences could be catastrophic. He believes that the longer the fighting continues, the higher the chance of a miscalculation, one that could ignite a global conflict. Trump claims that world leaders are playing a dangerous game. He argues that continued military aid and intervention could push Russia to take more extreme measures, possibly leading to a nuclear confrontation. According to him, the war must end immediately. But how? Is peace even possible? Trump has made bold claims that the war could be ended within weeks, but is that realistic? If this war escalates into a full-scale global conflict, what would that mean for the world? Economic collapse. Stock markets would crash, trade routes would be disrupted, and inflation would skyrocket. Nations already struggling with debt would face complete financial collapse. Massive casualties. Millions could be conscripted into military service, and cities could be destroyed. The death toll would be unprecedented. Nuclear warfare. The worst-case scenario, if nuclear weapons are used, entire regions could be wiped out, leaving devastation that lasts for generations. Cyber warfare and infrastructure attacks. power grids, banking systems, and even essential services like hospitals could be targeted, leading to chaos in everyday life. This is the nightmare scenario that experts fear. And if world leaders fail to de-escalate the war in Ukraine, this could become a reality. Trump has proposed a controversial plan to end the war quickly. His strategy includes direct negotiations with both Russia and Ukraine, immediate ceasefires to stop the bloodshed, economic incentives to encourage peace. Trump's plan also includes direct negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He has stated that he will meet with Putin at some point, though the exact timeline remains unclear. His goal? To finalize an agreement that would end the war and ensure stability in the region. But is this plan realistic? Could Putin and Zelensky truly reach an agreement? And more importantly, would NATO, the US, and other global powers accept it? Trump also believes that European troops should act as peacekeepers, not combat forces. He suggests that once an agreement is reached, peacekeepers from European nations could ensure that both sides comply with the terms. In his view, this would prevent further escalations and allow both countries to rebuild without outside interference. There have even been discussions about a potential visit to Moscow, where high-level negotiations could take place. Some reports suggest that if the war nears a resolution, Trump himself may engage in diplomatic talks. Would such a meeting lead to an agreement? Could world leaders finally come together to prevent further destruction? The clock is ticking. What comes next? The world is running out of time. If diplomacy fails, we may be entering one of the darkest chapters in modern history. Trump's warning is clear. He sees this war as not just a regional conflict, but a global crisis waiting to happen. His fear is that if unresolved, the war could expand beyond Russia and Ukraine, pulling in more countries and ultimately igniting a larger global conflict. The involvement of the US, NATO, and other world powers already makes this war more than just a two-nation battle. With each escalation, the world edges closer to a point of no return. The world stands at a crossroads. On one side, the war continues, with no clear end in sight. On the other side, there is a chance for peace, but only if world leaders are willing to make difficult compromises. Will the war in Ukraine end before it's too late? Or are we witnessing the first stages of a conflict that could engulf the entire world? As tensions rise and global powers continue to take sides, one question remains. Is World War III inevitable? What do you think? Is Trump right about the risk of World War III? Can this war be ended within weeks, or are we on a path to global disaster? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this video insightful, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss updates on world affairs. Stay informed, stay aware, and as always, thank you for watching.